Hey everybody, welcome back to my book chat channel. So this is another book review. This one is for HarperCollins Canada, and the book is called All We Left Behind, a novel by Danielle R. Graham. This book is not out yet, but will be out as of March 30th, 2021, so next month. So as per usual, I will jump into the synopsis and go from there. Okay, so All We Left Behind, a powerful and incredibly moving historical novel inspired by an untold story of the Second World War. It is Vancouver 1941. As the war rages around the world, Hitler's fury is yet to be felt on the peaceful shores of Main Island in Western Canada. Sweethearts Hayden and Chai, or Chi, I'm not actually sure how it's pronounced, but I'm going to go with Chai, are in love, but everything changes after Pearl Harbor. Now seen as the enemy, Chai and her family are forced into an internment camp. Powerless to help them, Hayden joins the Air Force to bring about an end to this devastating war. The thought of Chai is all that keeps him alive. Can they both survive long enough to be reunited, or will the war be the only thing to separate their love? So, this is, as you could potentially tell from the short synopsis, is a fiction, historical, World War II type genre. And I gotta say that I really enjoyed this book. I really tend to fall for stories or get pulled into stories that are like this, especially when they are surrounded somehow around the First or Second World War. And I find that this is the first one I've read that has a Canadian perspective to it. Most of the ones I've ever read, in fact, all of the ones I've read before in the past, have always been either from a British perspective or a German perspective or an American perspective, primarily American or British. But this is the first time I have read one from a Canadian perspective where it really brings the story home for me, as I am originally from Vancouver, the Lower Mainland to be specific. So just the fact that I could relate to the places they were talking about and the environment in which they lived was nice to read. But from that being said, like I was mentioning, it was nice to read from a Canadian perspective, meaning to, see or read what it was like for those who were suddenly viewed as the enemy and were forced from their homes and suddenly lost the rights to live as they were. As far as I'm concerned, they were no longer citizens. They were not even really treated as people. They were treated more like cattle. And it didn't matter if they were there 2 years or 52 years. It seemed like they were all treated the same. And the darker their skin tone and the more the connections to Japan they had, the worse it was for them. And it was heart-wrenching to watch neighbors turn on neighbors, as everyone felt threatened and they felt it was their neighbor's fault. Who can you trust? And I really hated the discrimination and the racism and prejudice, bits that were put into this. And I understand, things like that. This is based on true events, and it's just really sad to read about all of those kinds of things. And there's a lot of that still goes on today, but I just find that really disheartening, a country especially that prides itself on being open to everybody, regardless of race, religion, or skin color, to suddenly have it turn on, its own citizens because of fear primarily. I mean, I get that fear, but at the same time, it's just sad to see. So while yes, this is definitely a love story, but it's a subtle love story. It's not over the top gushy or graphic in any means necessary. As far as I'm concerned, it's a young love story. And while that is definitely a big part of it, it wasn't the only part of it. There was a big part of it that focused primarily on the war, as of course he joined the Air Force. So I jumped back and forth between his experiences in amongst being a soldier or amongst the Air Force, and then the events that led up to his departure, and some of the things that she went through as well. I think that was very, very well done. He was, not to spoil anything, but he ends up being a POW, and it really dove into the details of what you might find there, what some people might actually experience being a POW, and having no choices, no rules, or rather no rights, and having everything stripped of them, literally, even their clothing at some point. Just the fact that those who survived it are just incredible. The amount of bravery that went on is just remarkable, and that's just based on how the story dictated it. But again, I couldn't imagine going through things like that. It's just remarkable. So for me, I felt it was definitely a really well-read story. It was well described. I felt that, I could easily be pulled in and be a part of the world. So for me, it was definitely a 5 out of 5 stars. Definitely one that I would eventually pick up and even actually reread. I think the only thing I didn't like about the story so much is they focused so much on his story and the events leading up to the story with her, but they didn't really continue on her story. So you don't get to find out too much about what happened to her while he was in the Air Force, and you'll find out why, but or you'll find out sort of how that all comes about. But I still would have liked to have known more about what her and her family went through being stuck in those internment camps and being treated as they were. But apart from that, I felt it was a really, really good story, and I would definitely be looking out for more stories from this author. So again, this is called All We Left Behind, and by Danielle, R. Graham. And again, this will be released on March 30th. And yeah, so I thank you all so much for tuning in, and I will be back soon with another book review. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Happy reading.